Folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the classifications and definitions used by the globalist international propaganda machine to declare that right-wing white supremacist Nazis, that right-wing terrorism and violence is the biggest threat, tremble in your boots, everybody, because that's the biggest threat. Whereas left-wing violence, hey, that doesn't really happen. No, that doesn't really happen. It's just right-wing violence, white supremacist Nazis are the biggest threat. So, and these are the talking points. And if you look sort of around the whole Western world today, in Australia, the body politic runs around saying that we're being overrun with neo-Nazis, apparently. If that's the case, how come I've never met a Nazi in my whole lifetime? If they were as numerous and everywhere and omnipresent as is claimed, surely I'd have met one. But that's the claim. Those are the talking. Now, what is a neo-Nazi and what do they want? Hey, don't talk details to me. Don't ask questions, you fucking Nazi. What are you, Hitler or something? And the same goes in Britain. The minute that there's any complaint about mass migration, it's, they're all the members of the Hitler Youth, Hitler, Nazi, fascist, swastika, Hitler, Nazi. It just rolls off, and we can all dismiss it as a load of nonsense, of course. But there are some very official sounding and looking reports that have been produced by various groups, some of them hysterical activist groups, some by groups that have sensorial or censorious powers. For example, some of the major online social media platforms may use the SPLC or the ADL or groups like that to do their their management of who gets kicked off the platform, who's allowed to stay, what videos are allowed to stay, and so on. And various other activist groups are given this power, whereas the supposed evil right wing isn't given any of these sort of powers or any of these types of permission to give oversight. So the censorship regime is heavily only one way, and not surprisingly, they come out and say, well, the problem is the right. Those guys, they're the problem, not us. But it's hardly an impartial process or one that's judged on the facts. But I had a look at a number of these so-called reports, and bear in mind that during the Biden years, Auto Pen Biden, who didn't know what fucking day it was, in a rigged election, he was the biggest threat is white supremacists. Anyone that went to one of Donald Trump's rallies was a Nazi. The media reflected anyone that voted for Donald Trump was a Nazi, and they just constantly peddled this theme. So they, in the midst of all this sort of, well, they're all Nazis. It's very easy to put forward a claim that, well, the biggest threat is on the far right. It is the right. They're the ones that are doing all the terrorism. They're the ones that are doing all the bad stuff. Us good folks on the left. Well, now, whenever you look at any of these reports, it's instantly apparent that it's propaganda. That the first paragraph gives that away. The framing of the whole discussion is that, well, we're the good guys, they're the bad guys. It begins with that rather than say, well, here are the facts. Now, there's a few devices they use. They give an impossibly narrow definition of what constitutes left-wing violence. For example, nothing that Antifa did, torching of buildings, the murders, the mayhem that they spread, the taking over entire city areas, openly calling for the death of white people and police and so on. None of that was terrorism. None of that was political violence. That was just oppressed people. So they're oppressed people fighting back against oppression. That's all that was. So you can't include that. Then they had used a relative. And this is a scam that's used widely now all over the Western world and invented by the globalists and their two-bit flunky foot soldiers. Is this idea of social power. So that if somebody or a group or whatever, or representing a group that has less social power than the outfit or the people or the group that you're attacking, and you've got less social power, they've got more social power, then that's not an act of political violence, because the guys you're attacking have more social power than you. Therefore, you're just fighting back again against oppression. You're just trying to even the odds here that this is not political violence. But if a group, and straight white males have, and they're deemed as having the most social power, if they either in act, speech, or thought, if they are against you, then they have committed political violence, social political violence, because they have more social power than the other guys do. So if straight white males or white people complain about mass migration, and then the mass migration is primarily brown and black people, if they complain, then that is in fact an act of terror, as they assert. So that's already you've satisfied the basic requirements for terror, because you verbally complained that mass migration isn't working. You're opposing it. Now that means, and if they extend this, they go one step further. Well, that means that you've said it verbally, but your thoughts are pure evil. So you've committed an act of terror by what we say you might be thinking. That's therefore you've crossed the line into terror, because we say you might be thinking something. So they can ascribe intent to these things. Well, you said that you're opposed to mass migration. People opposed to mass migration are Nazis or fascists. That therefore means you're a Nazi. And if you're a Nazi, it means you're Hitler. And that's it. And therefore now you are a cell, a group committed to the terror, political terror, because you're trying to oppress people with less social power. So therefore you are, by our definition, a terrorist. So these are the two sort of things. So the ways that they use to define it. So for example, if a trans person goes in and shoots up a school, that is a definition of terror, because they're trying to achieve some sort of socio-political statement or objective by this act. But there are two sort of caveats, or a number of caveats, that they use. Well, this person is an oppressed person, so they're really responding to their oppression, and so they're not intending to do bad. They're not intending to commit violence or terrorism. They're just responding to the oppression that they're suffering. So you can't say that's an act of terrorism. But if a straight white male goes and does something, then their intent was to be Hitler. That's it. Therefore, they are terrorists, and so on. So they use these insane justifications and rationalizations, so that to commit an act of a left-wing person to commit an act of terror or political violence, the definition becomes very narrow. And again, BLM, Antifa, all these sorts of things, that's not political violence or terrorism, because they're only fighting back against oppression. The white people, the people with the most social power, made them do it, forced them to do it. But their intent wasn't to do something bad. Their intent was to do something good. Well, what was the good thing? To fight the oppression of the evil white Nazi. So in that way, they give free passes to pretty much all left-wing political violence, because his intentions were good. They're brown and black people with limited social power or lesser social power. Therefore, intentions can't be bad. They have to be good on a relative basis. Whereas, the other people, they're all, their intentions must be bad because they have most social power. Therefore, they're all Nazis. Therefore, so right-wing terror is the biggest danger. From where? From all those Nazis, of course. Well, who are the Nazis? Anyone who voted for Donald Trump. So given that sort of framing and those sort of absurd and ridiculous lunatic definitions, they're able to say, as Biden did, not that he knew what he was saying, but Merrick Garland, that Jewish leftist activist, and but even the so-called apolitical heads of police forces, mayors, the FBI, and all this sort of thing back in the Biden years, they're all coming, right-wing violence, white supremacy, Nazis, they're everywhere. We're getting threats everywhere from these Nazis, which of course is a pure and utter and total fabrication. But when you distill it, what do they mean by all this? And what ultimately is the essence of their definition? Their definition is that anyone who is not fully, totally, absolutely on board with the globalist project, mass migration, gender fluidity, all this sort of stuff, anyone who's not on board with the mass migration project and who questions it, verbally or physically, they get out and protest or something, they are now the terrorists. The dividing line is if you disagree with, question, or oppose the mass migration project, you are now a terrorist. You are now a right-wing Nazi, fascist, swastika-waving terrorist, and you are a threat to the establishment. The establishment is owned and controlled and directed by the globalist cabal, by the way, whereas any act of terror, any act of violence, no matter how brutal and all-encompassing it may be, if you are in support of, directly or indirectly in support of the globalist project, such as BLM, Antifa, and so on, if you're in support of the globalist project, then you cannot be a terrorist by this definition. So that's really the essence of it. You oppose the globalist project, you're a fucking Nazi, swastika-waving, Hitler, Nazi, fascist, terrorist, end of story. You're right wing, you're a white supremacist Nazi. And that's the framing, and that's how they're putting it together. That something as insane as this could be parroted by the entire globalist media establishment just shows you how far we've fallen. You've been on Tassos today, your pushback challenge. Thank you for listening.